Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, as you all know, this past Saturday marked the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. And I was at the march, I was there doing civic engagement work. And while I was there, I received a very disturbing text message about this shooting that happened in Jacksonville, Florida, where you had this white supremacist by the name of Ryan Christopher Palmetto shoot and kill three innocent black people. This man went to a Dollar General, shot one black person in the parking lot, and shot two other black people inside of the Dollar General. And before we go any further, I want to express my condolences to the family, extend my condolences. May each and every one of the victims rest in peace, and may God comfort and protect the families during this very difficult and troubling time. So you had those black people killed, and the names of the individuals are Michelle Carr, she was 52 years old, Arnaud Joseph, who was 19 years old, and Gerald Gallian, who was 29 years old. These people were killed simply because of the color of their skin. And this is not speculation at this point. All the victims were black. And this killer, this white supremacist, wrote a manifesto where he expressed his hatred towards black people. And before this hate monger, before this white supremacist terrorist went to this Dollar General and killed three black people, he actually went to Edward Waters University, a predominantly black university in a black town. He tried to go there and he was stopped by security because security had been notified of suspicious activity. They had been notified by a student that there was someone who looked out of place. The security guards basically told this person to leave the campus, and they followed this person until they were off of campus, and then they also contacted law enforcement. So we have a situation that could have been far worse than what it actually ended up being. Any loss of life is horrible, but this situation could have been far worse. Dozens of black people could have been killed at that university. And I know that there were some statements made where there was people basically saying, well, they don't know if he intended to target the university or not. There's no doubt in my mind that this man intended to target that university. And thank God that he wasn't able to do so. This man was armed with a handgun and an AR-15. He legally purchased these weapons. After this horrific tragedy took place, you had Republican politicians and candidates for president basically condemn this killing, condemn the killer. And, that's something that any decent human being should do, condemn this types of violence that occurs. And so Ron DeSantis actually went to an event where he was speaking out about this violence, and he was booed by the black audience. And I understand why they booed him. And I'm going to get into that right now, and then I'll go into my thoughts about this particular tragedy and what we should do about it. Here you have Ron DeSantis, a man who has had an anti-black agenda. He's done everything that he's could in his power to try to whitewash history and to blot out the pain and suffering of black people. This man went as so far as to suggest that black people somehow benefited from slavery. This man wants to make that a part of the curriculum, that they're required to teach about the benefits of slavery. That's what this man is doing. This man tried to prevent an AP course in African American history from being taught in Florida schools. This man has helped to enact the Stop Woke Act. that basically censors teachers and prevents them from teaching about African American history. Certain books are banned. And unfortunately, other states are following behind the example of Ron DeSantis. In addition to that, in addition to like this anti-black legislation that this man has helped implement, this man has made it easier for people in his state to bear arms. He has a permit-less concealed weapons law there. Basically meaning you don't need to have a permit in order to have concealed weapons. And I'll post articles in the description to this video so you all can read up about this information so that you will have the source of the information that I'm providing in this particular video. And there's one thing that I have to point out before I go back to Ron DeSantis. This man, this white supremacist, this terrorist who carried out this horrific killing actually used a weapon that had a swastika on it. And we know that the swastika is the symbol of the Nazi Party, the ultimate symbol of white supremacy. So this is the weapon that this man fired, a weapon that had the swastika on it, and his victims, again, were all black. Without a doubt, this was a hate crime. Without a doubt, this was racist, white supremacist terrorism. So let's get back into Ron DeSantis. So he passes this anti-black legislation. Then he makes it easier for people to acquire weapons. And then you have this tragedy unfold there. And he is partly to blame for this, partly to blame for helping to create an openly hostile environment, an environment that is toxic towards black people, an environment that is hateful towards black people. That's what this man has helped create. And by loosening the gun restrictions, this man has made it possible for people like this damn killer to acquire weapons and to kill people. So yes, there is blood on this man's hands. And so I understand why people were speaking out forcefully against this man. And we have to understand that people like this killer, for all intents and purposes, they are the illegitimate child of the Republican Party. They are the Republican Party's chicken, in the word of Malcolm X, that's coming home to roost. The Republican Party for far too long has pandered to these white supremacists and white nationalists. They have pandered to them. They have catered to them. They have tried to win them over and win their vote. And it is no accident that this man who carried out this act of terrorism, of cowardice, is a Republican. That is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that those people celebrated, for instance, when Donald Trump was elected. White supremacists celebrated his election. The white nationalists, the white supremacists are, again, the children of the Republican Party. They are their illegitimate child. And they're trying to disown that child when that child acts out. But during the election season, they pander to that child. They try to win over that child's vote, try to win over that child's support with their anti-black rhetoric, with their anti-immigrant rhetoric, with their hateful rhetoric targeted towards black people. When they talk about stopping woke, the Stop Woke Act, they're talking about stopping black people. They're talking about preventing black people and people in general from having actual facts about the history of the African American in this country. So that's something that I had to point out. The other thing is this. We have this story repeated time and time again. where you have these mass shootings take place in this country. And you have these do nothing, know nothing, right wing Republicans standing in the way of reasonable gun control regulations. Despite all these tragedies that happen, despite who the victims are, like whether it's a synagogue being shot up, whether it's black people being killed, or whether it's their own precious white children being killed, these do nothing, know nothing Republicans continue to oppose reasonable gun control laws. And in light of that dangerous reality that black people face and other people face, the threat that comes from these white supremacists who commit acts like this, whether we're talking about Dylan Roof or we're talking about this particular incident right here, we can no longer just pray our way out of this situation. We can no longer just sit by and wait for these Republicans to turn over a new leaf and realize the importance of gun control laws in this country. We can't afford to wait for them to pass reasonable gun control laws because we know they do not have the will to do so. We know even after this tragedy is unfolded, the Republicans in Florida and around this country are still going to oppose reasonable gun control laws. So in light of that climate, it's time for black people to defend ourselves. We can't just pray our way out of it. We can't just wait around for these Republicans to get their minds right and do what's reasonable. We have to tool up and defend ourselves. In these places where they have, these loose gun control laws or where they have open carry, each and every one of us need to learn how to use firearms, and we need to bear those arms so that we can defend ourselves from white supremacists like this. To hell with turning the other cheek, to hell with sitting back and letting them kill us, being sacrificial lambs, and praying, for the forgiveness of these people, forgiving these people that kill us. To hell with that, man. It's time for us to stand up as a community and tool up. And you got all these gangsters in our community, these thugs in our community. They have all this energy when it comes to killing their own. But where is your energy when it comes to defending your own from your open enemy? Your 400-year-long enemy that enslaved you for hundreds of years, that Jim Crowed you for decades and still brutalizes and kills you today in these streets. That whole incident that took place during this March on Washington should be a wake-up call for all of you who have fallen asleep, for all of you who have become blind, deaf, and dumb, for all of you who think that there's no longer a need for a March on Washington, for all of you who question the relevance of civil rights groups and people that are actually out there in the streets doing the work. It should be a wake-up call for you. I'm sure there are plenty of people that were sitting at home questioning whether or not it's even relevant to have a March on Washington. While I was at the March on Washington, even though there were thousands of people there should have been way more people at that event in light of the conditions that we're in right now, in light of the times that we are in right now, where you have police killing black people, where you have people trying to write us out of the history books, where you have the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, where they have stripped the Voting Rights Act of its teeth and of its power. They've literally gutted it. And Congress is sitting by doing nothing to repair the damage done by the U.S. Supreme Court when they decided that Holder that Shelby County versus Holder case. All these years later, 10 years later, and we're still in the same boat when it comes to voting rights. We still don't have the protections of pre-clearance. All these years later. And people have just embraced that as just a reality because of those Republicans who are obstructing the passage of the the updated Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. They have been obstructing those acts. And as long as the people are apathetic, they will continue to do just that. At a time when our affirmative action was destroyed by the Supreme Court, there should have been way more people at that event. But I commend those who were there. I commend all the organizations that are involved. I commend all of the individuals that are still heeding the call and still on the front lines in the struggle for civil and human rights. But yeah, and the other thing that I have to say is this, even though this gunman committed suicide, the investigation is not over. The Justice Department continues to investigate. The Justice Department needs to find out how this young man became radicalized. What organizations were at the cause or at the center of his radicalization? Those organizations need to be monitored. Those organizations need to be dismantled if they are violating any laws. We need to find out if there were any co-conspirators, who helped this young man purchase these firearms. Did anybody work with him, in carrying out this attack? The same kinds of questions that people raise when there's a terrorist attack, when it's a terrorist attack from, people, either Islamic extremists or people from the Muslim world. When they're involved in terrorist attack, these are the things that are investigated, and those are the things that need to be investigated in this particular situation. And we need to be clear. Like, there are some people that are going to try to brush this off as some mental health issue. To hell with that. This is all about white supremacy. This man made himself clear with his manifesto expressing hatred towards black people. It's time for the Republican Party to deal with the racism within that party. Instead of being apologists for white supremacists, we need these black Republicans to get their minds right and speak out against racism within their own political party. So those are my quick thoughts about this horrible tragedy. Again, I send my condolences to the families of the victims. I pray that God bless them and protect them and comfort them during this difficult time. This is crazy, and it's time for all of us to wake up.